Well, this is our last day here in the house we've lived in for 10 years. We are gonna be out of here tomorrow, and so I just wanted to do a little video just to document what I've done with the garden here, some of the plants and trees and the habitats I've created here. This is obviously the front of the house here. This is where I began in 2009. The whole front of this house was all lawn. This was all mowed, typical mowed turf lawn, and chemically treated, no weeds, dead soil. There was a Bradford pear, calorie pear. It was right here in the middle of this picture. It was only here for a couple of years, and then we cut that down and basically replaced it with this autumn brilliant serviceberry, which is just an infinitely nicer tree than a Bradford pear, and a hybrid of two native species. But it's a great great tree all around, all 4 seasons, and one of the rare situations where I don't have any real problem using hybrids is with service berries, because there's a lot of naturally occurring hybrids. The species are really kind of not super clear, like where the lines are drawn with service berries, in my experience. This is one of the 2 rain gardens here, and this is basically what I did was the original bed here. I just excavated it down maybe 12 inches or so, and so instead of it draining water off to the driveway, water flows into here from other places. This downspout, mainly from this gutter downspout here, which goes off the roof, flows into here, and so all that runoff, and somewhat off the walk here and the surrounding area, a little bit from the driveway. But so basically all that water, instead of being runoff that runs off down the street, it's absorbed into the soil here. And it also waters some really cool wetland plants too that have done very fantastically well in here, even in drought, even in extended droughts. These are plants that typically grow in very, very wet places, but they have a surprising amount of drought tolerance, even so. And this is anytime there is any rain at all, even a little trickle, it's going to flow into here. So this is definitely going to be the wettest area around in the landscape. And it's just developed beyond my imagination how well it's turned out. There's a button bush in that large shrub in the center there, and it's going to be flowering in a while. Right now it's just got tiny little flower buds at the beginning. This is a swamp azalea, Rhododendron viscosum, which flowers like next month, or either late June or into July. It's a really late flowering. It's a deciduous rhododendron called a swamp azalea. And this is a dwarf variety of Atlantic white cedar right here. Also love to be in wet places. The edges here are all Pennsylvania sedge, Carex pennsylvanica. I really like that plant for edging. And it can be mowed, so otherwise it'll flop out over the edge a little bit, but if you just mow it occasionally, trim it or whatever, then it makes a really nice edge, and it's super resilient. Almost impossible for weeds to get in there. Just an unbelievably functional and beautiful garden. These are the shrubs in front of the house here. This was what I did first. There was hollies and there was rhododendrons and the usual non-native shrubs, and they were all like out of place. The taller ones were out toward the path, and so I cut everything down, replaced it with, this is a summer sweet right in the middle, Clethra alnifolia. The tall shrub is a red chokeberry, Aronia arbutifolia, which is an absolutely stunning plant, especially in the fall when it's scarlet red, the whole thing, for several weeks. Bayberry, this is northern bayberry here, and this is bearberry growing over this slow sprawling plant here. And another one, Arctostaphylos uva ursi. It's our only eastern native Arctostaphylos species. And where we're moving to in California, there are dozens of native Arctostaphylos species. They call them manzanitas. This one is just called bearberry, And it actually grows on the west coast. It grows wild up on the Pacific coast as well, and also in some of the higher mountains in the west. It's a very unusual species. And here it's one of the most drought-tolerant plants that we native plants that we have. It thrives on dry sand dunes. And in California, it's overall, it's one of the least drought-tolerant Arctostaphylos species. All the western species are basically all much more drought-tolerant because they're evolved in a totally different climate where there's no precipitation for half the year. These ones here, even though they grow in bone-dry places, they tend to get some summer rain, which makes a big difference. And this is our native eastern ceanothus. It's called New Jersey tea, Ceanothus americanus. It's a shrub. It's a woody shrub, but it kind of basically behaves as a perennial because it always, at least in my experience, they always die to the ground every winter. And then they come up, and they just come up roaring, and then they're covered in beautiful, billowy white flowers. And probably a couple weeks or so from now, and they flower at the same time as the orange butterfly weed. It's one of the best flower combinations that I've ever seen. Well, this plant here is butterfly weed. They're obviously not flowering yet, but the buds are already formed on there. And you can see them, the ends of those stems. Those are going to be big clusters of orange milkweed flowers in a couple weeks. And this is prairie dropseed, the grass in here, and purple cone flower, which is all self-seeds all over the place. This little dwarf white pine, which I just absolutely love, created from a witch's broom. I mean, I bought it in a nursery, but they come from witch's brooms originally, up in the tops of pine trees. So this is the front lawn. This was all vegetable beds only up until only just about a year ago, when I removed all the vegetable beds and graded this all out and seeded it with Prairie Nursery No-Mow grass seed. Other than I didn't plant the clover. The clover all came in on its own, and I basically just left it. I selectively weeded it, and I got rid of all the other weeds and left the clover. And this is what's developed, and I'm very happy with it. And the number of bees on this is incredible. All these clover flowers, which means you need to be careful walking around barefoot. This far area over here where this tree is. This is a dwarf European sweet cherry. This was originally, all this grass area was all edible garden, basically all raised beds with vegetables, and I had a few more fruit trees too. I still have some fruit trees here. And this one there's over here. Over there, there's a dwarf peach, loaded with peaches right now. This is called narrow leaf mountain mint, Pycnanthemum tenuifolium. I just adore this. It's not flowering yet, but even when it's not, I think this is the biggest and tallest I've ever seen. This soil that's growing in here is very rich soil, but covered in flowers later on in the season, and in turn covered in pollinators, all sorts of pollinating insects. Love these mountain mints. I have 5 different species of mountain mints, maybe even 6 here that I have growing. This is like basically the most recent addition. And I started growing from seed a couple of years ago. This is all common milkweed coming up all over, which is, a little bit hard to live with sometimes. But I just love it. If the fun's in the wrong place, you just pull it out. The stems pull out very easily. This is monarch butterfly's favorite food, so that's the main reason why it's here. Plus, I love the flowers. They're very fragrant, really nice flowers on them. Not quite yet. This is the autumn brilliance serviceberry. And then this here is the basically prairie meadow garden, the sunniest, driest, most open area of the yard. So This is where my cactus is, eastern prickly pear. Cactus patch. This started from just a few, like half a dozen pads. Basically really small little rooted cuttings that I ordered from a nursery in, I think it was in New Jersey. I don't know how many years ago. Maybe 6, 7, and 8 years ago or something like that. And it's just amazing. It's such an amazing plant. It completely like deflates and the pads just lay on the ground when fall comes, and they just lay there under the snow all winter. The snow melts and they don't look very good. They look really beat up, and their pads are kind of purplish color and they're flat on the ground, and then they just, once it starts warming up, it turns into this very quickly. And it's gonna all be covered in huge yellow flowers pretty soon. This is the real native, New England native wild lupin, Lupinus perennis, which is a very rare species anymore now, around here at least. And then this is a mix of various native grasses and wildflowers. Prairie dropseed, these tough, kind of clumpy grasses. It's probably my favorite native grass, Sporobolus heterolepis. Prairie dropseed. There's some more here. A lot of little blue stem, wild bergamot, smooth aster, which is now, which used to be Aster laevis, and now it's Symphyotricum laevi, but basically it's called smooth aster. There's some of the smooth aster. I don't know if it's smooth. I guess it refers probably to the leaves, which are very smooth. And they flower really late in the season, like in September into October. Beautiful light blue flowers. What I consider, there's basically 3 super blooms here every year. This is the first one, just got passed, which was, although the lupins are still around, the wild lupins are kind of part of the first one. The wild lupins, columbines, which I have, there's still a little bit of flowers on the red columbine, the wild columbine here. Golden Alexanders, which are, there's still some heartleaf golden Alexanders flowering over here. The yellow flowers there around the red columbine, and then the pink wild geraniums, which are all done now. Just got past. Still see some old pink flower petals around here on the wild geraniums that have fallen off, but there's a lot of wild geraniums, and this was all lit up with their pink flowers until pretty recently. So that's basically the first super bloom, I call it, where it just all lights up with flowers. Then the next one will be probably in like 2 to 3 weeks, and that's when this is Heliopsis helianthoides, which is known as, common name is oxeye sunflower. It's covered in yellow flowers pretty soon, not yet. And with the purple coneflower, this is all purple coneflower. Well, right here, purple coneflower, oxeye sunflower. And then with the butterfly weed, New Jersey tea, along the front there, it's all orange butterfly weed. So that's the second super bloom with the coneflowers, the milkweeds. You got the wild bergamot too, Monarda fistulosa. That'll be coming pretty soon. And there's a bunch of that in here, all scattered around, various clumps. This is the wild bergamot, Monarda fistulosa, and that has these really nice lavender flowers that'll be coming pretty soon. And then for the third super bloom, that's basically the goldenrods and the asters. And there's a bunch of those in here. These plants in front of there's this tall Joe Pye weed right here. And then down in front, right next to it here, this is goldenrod. This is Solidago rugosa, rough leaf goldenrod. A cultivar called Fireworks that I got from Garden in the Woods in Framingham. Right, one of the first things I planted actually 10 years ago. And I cut it back like this because what that does, it basically makes it flower on shorter plants. So it keeps them a little bit shorter, because they can get, again, I mean, the soil in here is all so rich, which is really not that much of a advantage when you're growing a garden like this, because it just makes stuff get bigger and grow faster, and there's not really any any real benefit to that. Just kind of means you need more maintenance. But so this is all that goldenrod here, and that's going to be all lit up in blazing yellow flowers in September and October, along with the there's a bunch of purple asters up in back here, New England aster, smooth aster. Those are the main aster species in here. Various grasses, like this is their switchgrass. There's little blue stem. Most of this grass is little blue stem. And then this tall one here is actually, I think this is Indian grass, Sorghastrum nutans. That's one that's really done well. I've planted a lot of those, and they seem to be kind of, at least here, they're kind of picky about where they like to be. It's a big, tall grass prairie plant that'll, with the flower stalks will get 6 feet tall on it. Along with this Joe Pye weed too. This is Eutrochium, and there's several species that I can't remember. It's either maculatum or fistulosum. But they're all the Joe Pyes are basically, they look pretty much like this. Big, tall plants with whorls of leaves, and then in probably next month, topped off with these huge clusters of pink flowers on top. You know, all kinds of insects just love, butterflies and bees and everything else. They're beautiful plants. They get tall though, just like the Indian grass. This milkweed's all going to be flowering within a week or less. These ones here, and I hope against hope to see monarch caterpillars on these, but it's too early, I think. So I haven't even seen any eggs. And then there's this side here. This was all lawn, and this is now all hay-scented fern for the most part. 3 paper birches, these are the tallest trees I've planted. I mean, they were 10 years ago. I put them in as little 1-gallon seedlings, and I think these trees are probably over 40 feet tall now. There's a Joe Pye weed that's just self-seeded in there on its own. And since birches don't live forever, especially paper birches, there's a lot of things that are killing them now. So I always kind of figured they'd kind of more or less be on borrowed time, and so I put a sassafras in here. This is sassafras seedling. And then I had a whole row of these big arrowwood viburnum dentatum that were probably on 8 feet tall, 8 to 10 feet wide, and viburnum leaf beetle just completely devastated them this year. So I cut them down to the ground. And as you can see, they're sprouting back. They're either going to grow back or they'll be killed again or they'll be completely killed by the viburnum leaf beetle. I don't know. But either way, these are winterberry holly in here, Ilex verticillata, that I planted a couple of years ago, just thinking the arrowwoods might not be around forever either. And they're doing really well. These are seed-grown, straight species winterberries, and out of all these, there's 3 here. 1, 2, 3. Only this third one is a female. The others are males. So that's the chance you take. But the females are just absolutely spectacular in the winter. And then this is a white oak, which again planted because birches don't last forever. White oaks come pretty close though, because they can live for hundreds and hundreds of years. So hopefully this tree will be. I planted this as a little seedling, and it got eaten to the ground like 2 or 3 times by rabbits and whatnot. And then I put a little tree protector around it. Just a little wire sort of cage thing around it, and that let it finally grow. And now it's growing like crazy. And here, this is all forsythia hedge that I replaced. I just killed all this like less than 2 years ago. There's still all the dead stalks and everything, because all I do is basically cut it all to the ground, chop it all up, and lay it down on the ground, and put herbicide applied straight to the stumps. And it's just disappearing right before our very eyes. This little guy is a spice bush I just put in here. Lindera benzoin in that little cage right there. These are all winter berries. There's mostly winter berries in this row here. And there's a choke cherry, Prunus virginiana. And then there's some nanny berry, Viburnum lentago. Going back over there, this is gray dogwood. And this is a little witch hazel, which was in between these two big lilacs, which I cut to the ground this past winter and got rid of those finally. Shagbark hickory. These are more winter berries here. This is the other rain garden with a Henry Hicks Magnolia virginiana in the middle there, the little tree there. That's also called Sweet Bay magnolia. And it's actually native to, there's a small population in off like right along the coast in eastern Massachusetts, where it grows wild. And the nearest population to that is, I believe, down on Long Island, New York. So it's a very scattered little remnant population. But tree that's just been doing great in here, and it's evergreen. It's one of the very few native broadleaf evergreens here in this area. And this is getting wrecked by viburnum leaf beetle this year. Viburnum nudum variety casinoides. It's called I think it's called northern wild raisin. I think it's also called possum haw maybe, or it's called witherrod. It's got a few different common names, but it's been doing really well. This is the best year it's gone and flowered, and now this is the year where it's getting attacked by invasive pest viburnum leaf beetle. So unfortunately this plant might be on its way out too. It may be just like the arrowwoods, getting cut to the ground. These tall grass plants in the middle, I just love. This is a great rain garden or any kind of wet area plant. It's called fox sedge, Carex vulpinoidea. It's flowering right now. It's basically in full bloom right now. And back here, these are all winter berries. Here's the shagbark hickory. Of course, the big oak. This is probably close to 100 foot tall, 90, 100 feet. Just a magnificent northern red oak right there. This is the hop hornbeam I planted. Ostrea virginiana. And then the black birch, Betula lenta. Probably the second tallest of all the trees I've planted now. Been doing phenomenally well. Pond, this is pond number 1 down here, which is turning into more of a wetland now, like more of a freshwater marsh, which is fine. The water's kind of low, but the wetland plants in here are just thriving. Black gum, Nyssa sylvatica, self-seeded pagoda dogwood, Cornus alternifolia, also called alternate leaf dogwood. This is a straight species northern white cedar, or arborvitae, Thuya occidentalis, as opposed to all the horticultural variety ones that everybody gets in nurseries and you see. This is the actual wild species, which I really like a lot more than the cultivars. So this is pond number 2, just put in 2 years ago. This was dug out from lawn, lined with a rubber liner, and then basically you add your rocks and gravel and plants and water and give it some time. It doesn't take much time until it develops into something that looks completely natural. My little shade garden developing here, a little woodland garden underneath the black birch. Black birch is also called cherry birch, sweet birch. Probably has other names also. Most plants have multiple common names. So this is foam flower, Tiarella cordifolia, which was loaded with flowers this year. All past now. This is another mountain mint. This is called short-toothed mountain mint. And this is the most widely available variety or species of mountain mint. You can usually, if you find any mountain mints in nurseries, this is the one that's kind of catching on right now. Just like all the rest, just an incredible pollinator plant. I try to include mountain mints in every design that I do because I think they're so fantastic. Not flower, even it's an attractive enough looking plant. they're really, really beautiful when they're flowering, which will be later on in the summer. The back lawn here, this is mostly reseeded with Prairie Nursery No-Mow seed. Purple flowering raspberry all around here, which all spread initially from one little plant, a little 4-inch pot from Garden in the Woods. So if you're gonna plant purple flowering raspberry, give it room. This is Rubus odoratus. It's a native wild raspberry that has these big pinkish purple flowers that are going to be coming pretty soon in June into July. Beautiful flowers, edible fruits. Really cool looking plant. This is the spice bush grove back here. This is all Lindera benzoin. This big one here got smashed by a tree limb that I took off of this. I just kind of went the wrong way off this red maple here this past winter, but I knew it would grow right back, and it is. Basswood, this is Tilia americana, also called American linden. I planted that as a little tiny seedling in 2010, staghorn sumac. This is all Indian grass here, this tall grass here. Sorghastrum nutans, which I actually grew from seed and then into containers, and then I grew them for using for clients' properties. I had some left over, and here they are. This is one of the few things flowering right now, the mountain laurels, Kalmia latifolia. Another one of our very few native broadleaf evergreens. It also flowers very nicely. This has a lot of jewelweed. This is Impatiens capensis coming up all around here. Normally I'd probably weed a lot of these out, but we're moving tomorrow. This is northern bush honeysuckle. This was self-seeded in here. Direvilla lonicera. Fantastic small native shrub. Deserves to be used a whole lot more widely. Another one here. This is all Virginia creeper. Native vine that I love. And the rest of the bush honeysuckle. A little redbud that I volunteered. This is an eastern redbud, Cercis canadensis, that self-seeded in some other part of the yard, and I moved it over here. Doing well. These are northern bayberry. I just planted last year. Lots of Virginia creeper. This is a black haw viburnum, Viburnum prunifolium, which is a species native to New England, not Massachusetts, but further south. I've been very impressed with that one. These are maple leaf viburnum, Viburnum acerifolium. This is a completely native viburnum species. They actually grow in the woods right out back. So it's right at home here. They love being around hemlocks. And these have all been doing great. Great shrub native shrub for dry shade, very tough dry shade conditions. This is Aurelia racemosa, also called spikenard. It's a giant herbaceous native plant, or at least this one is. I've never seen any. This thing gets 6 feet tall. And then they'll have all these little greenish flowers that attract a lot of pollen. They don't look like much, but they attract a lot of pollinators. And then after that, they get these berries that are actually edible, and they taste like root beer. And they're really pretty. They're really pretty good. That's a cool plant. The whole thing dies back to the ground in the fall. This is wild bleeding heart, Dicentra eximia. Just spread all over the place. There's some white. It's cool how there's some white ones and some pink ones. There are a lot of pink ones. The lawn. This was all vegetable beds only just over a year ago. A lot of clover. And then this is just. It's interesting the difference. This I seeded last fall. This section here. Basically no weeds come up with that at all. and also no clover. So this was spring seeded over here with the clover and tons of weeds that I had to deal with all last summer, and also keeping it watered. And this was seeded in the fall, and there's really, you can't see hardly any, really, I don't see really any difference between the spring and fall seeded grass at all. So, although, except there's no clover or anything else with the fall seeded, so clearly fall seeding is the way to go. Elderberry, this was cut to the ground last fall, just to clean things up. And it's not a bad practice every once in a while to cut shrubs like this to the ground and just rejuvenate them. They're very well adapted to that. Elderberry, and then this is a silky dogwood, Cornus amomum, coming up really vigorously from their roots. Peach tree here. See all the peaches on this guy. This is a Red Haven peach that I planted like probably 6 years ago, or 7 years ago. I've never sprayed it or done anything with it as far as treating pests or diseases or anything. I just kept it pruned. It's always recommended with peaches to keep the center of the tree open, keep the trees kind of low. And that's all I've really been doing with it. It's got borers and it has different diseases, but I figured the tree would have been dead by now, but it's still producing very well. This was a little experiment I did here with the grass when I mowed it, just to leave the patch unmowed to see how it would look. Because this seed mix is basically designed to be able to be seeded and then not mowed. Hence the name no mow seed. But the only thing is you get these seed stalks that come up around this time of year, early June, and all around I mowed this and basically cut them all off, and then here in this one little section I just wanted to leave one spot just to see how it would come along. And I think it looks really nice like this too, personally. This is about as tall as it's really going to get. This is all fescues that the seed mix is composed of. It's the southern wax myrtle there, which I thought was a bayberry, but turned out to be getting a lot taller than any bayberry ever. This thing's 20 feet tall. From further down south, but it's been through minus 15 here. No problem at all. It usually stays evergreen through at least most of the winter. This is all comfrey, which is a permaculture plant. It's considered like a nutrient accumulator, where it has these deep roots that go deep down and can basically like extract mineral nutrients from deep down in the ground where a lot of other plants can't reach them. And it's a great plant for using as green mulch, where you just chop it off once or several times during the season. You can just cut the whole plant off, chop it up, and then use it as mulch around vegetable plants or anything you want to put some mulch around. Adds a lot of nutrients and does all the other good things that mulch does. So I don't know if I'd plant it nowadays, but it's a variety that's not invasive. It doesn't produce viable seeds, so it doesn't spread. It doesn't really, there's just basically clumps that get a little bit bigger every year. It hasn't been a problem. This is Joe Pye weed. There's several. This one's self-seeded in too. It's already getting close to 6 feet tall. This is probably going to get 8 feet tall this season. So there's the lawn. There's this other sort of prairie island bed here in the middle. This grass is all Casmanthium latifolium, northern sea oats, which is not native to New England, but it is a northeastern native grass, and I think it's nice to have. It can be a little aggressive, but I think it's a good plant to have in gardens. This is the bush cherry, Carmine Jewel bush cherry, which is supposed to be a great, delicious cherry that grows on I don't know, it doesn't get maybe 6 or 8 foot tall shrub rather than on a tree. You can see some of the fruits developing on it there. It's an eastern red cedar. This is a female. So it produces these berry-like cones that birds like to eat a lot. These are them there. They're basically juniper berries. Eastern red cedar is a species of juniper, even though it's called a cedar. It's not technically considered a true cedar. But they have this really nice shreddy reddish bark. This is the female one. And then past the summer, this is all summer sweet, Cleftra alnifolia. Past this, here's the male, which until just a little while ago had all these little tiny little brownish cones all over it. And then they did their thing, and they're all gone now. Now the tree's growing. This is the back side of the front. This is all golden Alexanders here, which I've deadheaded because I started doing that last year because they produce so many seeds. They can get a little bit too much. Get to be a little much. I don't normally deadhead anything, but I realized I kind of needed to do it with the golden. That's golden Alexanders is Zizia aurea, A-U-R-E-A. It's a great plant for a larval host for the black swallowtail butterfly. Gray dogwood here, which I hadn't pruned this or done anything with it until this past fall. This has been in here for, I don't know, 8 years probably or something like that, and I thinned it all out. And I think it looks, I mean, there's going to get a lot of sprouts coming back up from the ground, but I think it looks a lot better. It was just really thick, massive stems before, and I just kind of judiciously pruned it to thin it. I didn't cut anything back at all. I just thinned out the stems to make them not so dense and crowded. This is a pawpaw here. This is a sunflower, the cultivar's called. And this is Pennsylvania golden. These are both Asimina triloba, the pawpaw, which is the largest native fruit to North America. And you can see some of the little young fruits developing on it there. Just had its flowers on it until recently. Now the fruits are forming. This is the other side of it. This is the Cleftra alnifolia, summer sweet pepper bush it's also called. Joe Pye weed, black chokeberry, which is Aronia melanocarpa. There's the fruits on that coming along. Rosa virginiana, Virginia rose. This will be flowering shortly. Will be completely covered in pink, super fragrant flowers. Covered in bees. Hay-scented fern. This is a fragrant sumac, Rus aromatica, and this one is just a straight species one. It grows more upright, and there's also lower growing varieties as well. Pagoda dogwood. This is Cornus alternifolia, self-seeded here. Elderberry. And there's an American hazelnut, and chokecherry, Prunus virginiana. Some blueberries. A few blueberries on it. Just a few. They've just had phenomenal conditions for growing this year. This grass in here is pretty much all good blue stem, which is just spread all over and done great in here. I love the little blue stem is probably my favorite Massachusetts native grass. Here's the lawn, this is probably going to be the closest thing to a no maintenance lawn as you can pretty much have, where it doesn't need watering ever. It doesn't need any kind of pesticides at all or herbicide. There shouldn't be weeds. We shouldn't go brown in the summer, so it shouldn't, because the roots on this grass grow 4 times or so deeper than typical lawn grass. It's got all the clover in there, no fertilizer. You wouldn't even need fertilizer anyway, even without the clover. And it really only just needs to be mowed twice a season, really. I do it once around, if you don't like these flower stalks here, you can knock those off, mow once around early June, and again in the fall at some point. Especially it works great when you have your leaves down. You run over with the mower, chew them all up, and that can be your second mowing really for the year, and that's all you really need. There's more, lots of comfrey in here. Dwarf European sweet cherry. Lots and lots of unripe fruits on this guy. This is heartleaf golden Alexanders, Zizia aptera. Different species on the golden Alexanders in front. I don't see any on it right now, but this is the species that I've found that the black swallowtail caterpillars like to eat the most. I've found in years past the most caterpillars on this species. Some summer sweet. This is inkberry, Ilex glabra. This guy over here, evergreen native New England holly. The only evergreen. Well, there's also American holly. The only shrub, only one that's a shrub. Inkberry gets maybe 6 feet tall or so if you let it. Berry dropseed. This is going to be spectacular very soon. With the New Jersey tea and the butterfly weed. Another mountain laurel here, and this one is just, these really pick up the slack when there's like basically nothing flowering right at this moment, but these things are just gorgeous. I love mountain laurels. This is a Connecticut state flower. I used to see them in the woods all over back when I was a kid in Connecticut. They're a lot less common up here in the wild. Pycnanthemum tenuifolium. This is narrowleaf mountain mint. This is a sugar maple I planted. A little seedling. Maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Can't believe how much these things grow. This tree's probably 25 feet tall. Pagoda dogwood. It's self-seeded here. This is the snag that it's called a wildlife snag that I had a tree company come in and remove the top off this tree a few years ago. It was rotting down at the base and it was so tall that it was like in danger of hitting the house. So I figured instead of cutting it to the ground, why don't we keep the benefits of a standing dead tree? This is a great organization that in California, as it turns out, Cavity Conservation Initiative. So I was looking to get a sign. I just wanted to put a sign on the tree just to signify why it was here. And I got a sign from that organization. It's had all kinds of woodpeckers, and there's a bunch of holes in the tree here. I think there might be birds nesting in it, hopefully. Or if there aren't now, there will be. Yellow birch. Witch hazel. This is the back of the spice bush grove here. This is an American beech I planted as a little tiny little tube. It wasn't even a pot, and I can literally stand in the tree's canopy now. I planted this probably 10 years ago. American Fagus grandifolia, American beech. I'm not sure the height of this tree, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's close to 20, or if not now, it will be by the end of the season. Maple leaf viburnum in here that I planted, all flowering. This is an American hornbeam, Carpinus caroliniana, with this seed. It's basically, technically, it's fruits all over the place on it now. It's started flowering and producing seed last year. And again, all these every one of these was planted from a very small seedling, mostly 1 gallons or smaller. There's 6 spice bush plants, and all but 1 are female. So these plants are just completely loaded in fruits later on in the season, which is why there's seedlings of spice bush coming up all over the place around too, which is fantastic to see that. Super high quality native shrub. Lindera benzoin. And some of the best yellow fall color of anything too. Beautiful golden color in the fall. Striped maple. Yeah, this is Acer pennsylvanicum. I planted that in '09, I believe. This is an American elm here, Ulmus americana, that I didn't plant it, but I kind of rescued it. It was just a few feet tall when we first moved in here, and I cleared out all the stuff that was growing around it. This tree is over 45 feet tall now. I've been pruning it up with the pole saw to establish up this nice branch structure. The classic American elm vase shape that they produce. This is the biggest, this is the one I planted, actually the only one I planted, Cornus alternifolia, the pagoda dogwood or alternate leaf dogwood. The others all self-seeded in, which maybe they might have come from this one, I don't know. But it's produced tons of fruits every year and grown quite big. Initially this was just lawn that came all the way back into like right around here. And then on the edge was all buckthorn and burning bush and Norway maple and bitters. It was all invasives. There was no, other than this elm here, there was basically nothing else except invasives. Hopefully this tree avoids Dutch elm disease for a while and gets to be a full-size tree. Witch hazel. This here is a spice bush seedling that Lindera benzoin, where they're, as I said, they're self-seeding around, coming up very strong and healthy, and it's nice to see those instead of buckthorn, which is a horrible invasive, and that's all that was around here before. Witch hazel. There's another witch hazel and a nice yellow birch I planted in there. This is a white spruce here, which is not native to Massachusetts, but it is a New England native, just up the coast a little bit. And they do well. They do pretty well in semi-shade, so this one's been plugging along. It's actually growing pretty well this year. It's got already you can see the new growth on this tree is about a foot or so. Well, this top shoot is what it's done so well. So it's doing pretty well. So my advice is start small, start small scale, start with small plants, keep them watered, baby them until they get established, and then just be a little bit patient. And also always make sure you put the right plant in the right place as best as you can, because that makes all the difference in the world. This is a black gum here. This is sylvatica, which is right in back of the pond. I'm gonna miss this place, but I'm looking forward to the new house, the new challenges, everything that lies ahead. I'm ready to get started.